Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Get in the Herd After Hours. I'm your host, Alex Bond. I am a recovery coach and peer leader at the McShin Foundation. Get in the Herd After Hours is a recovery podcast from the McShin Foundation. I'm also a person in recovery from substance use disorder, which means that I have not found the need to put any mood or mind-altering substances in my body since September 23rd. I'm here with Garrett, Nathan, Brian. How are we doing, gentlemen?
All right.
Good. How are you?
Wonderful.
Yeah,
absolutely wonderful.
Gary and I, we've been working on like very little sleep, getting ready for Mobilize. Nathan is
probably getting sleep,
driving across the country, and you're introducing us from home in Richmond, so I think you're probably doing the best out of all of us right now. So.
Nice and comfortable, aside from the fact that it's been raining like all day.
Everything's good, you know?
Yeah, so this is kind of y'all's show to run. Nathan, you can go ahead and take it away, my friend.
Hey, Alex, I'm glad to see you. Good to see you. Garrett and Ryan, I'm really glad to see you too, and I'm glad that you haven't been crushed under the weight of this enormous task that you've been under. So,
yeah.
Welcome to
There's still some time left.
So what's going on, guys? You got an easy week ahead of you? Anything special going on?
Yeah. I got to tell you, I want to hear about your trip, if that's okay, because you're tuning in from a car right now, which has my interest peaked. But
it's quite metaphorical.
I think so Nathan called me, I don't know, 2.5 months ago. And he said, I think I'm going to drive across the country. And he gave us the dates he was leaving Virginia. He wanted to stop in some cities, and he wanted to drive out here to Mobilize. And of course, this was before we had to make the call to make Mobilize virtual and online this year because of COVID. And he said, I want to go out and I want to drive across the country, and I want to visit some people, and I want to see what other communities are doing, and I want to just kind of check out these different pockets. And I've got this crazy route all planned out, and he goes, I have no money. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just know I want to go do this thing right now. And I want to leave. I forgot what date it was, but like July 9th, was it, or something like that, right around there?
It was the 6th. Yeah,
the 6th. July 6th. And I want to leave July 6th.
You left on the 9th.
And we left on the 9th. tells me this story, and it's like deja vu all over again. And I'm like, well, we might have some advice for you, And I told Nathan, I said that was exactly what Garrett and I did 4 years ago, literally the same week 4 years ago. We had a genius idea that what we thought was genius to rent an RV and drive across the country. Except we were going, out to the Democratic National Convention and passing by the Republican convention on our way back. And we had this plan to like go see communities and what they were doing. And it was the first time we had visited McShin. It was the first time we had visited Chesterfield. We visited other, providers and recovery community organizations and parents and people in recovery and people who use drugs along the way. And that actually was, I think, the moment where I got really excited about Mobilize Recovery this year, being that was going to be your midpoint destination, because you still have to drive back. And it was really cool to see you kind of doing that. And so I want to say thank you for doing that, because I rushed in and I told Garrett, I was like, you're not going to believe this. And he called it Addiction Across America too, 2020. We were Addiction Across America, or AXA is your hashtag. We were hashtag Addiction X America. And it's really great to see you doing this, Nathan, and your commitment, to really do kind of like, not just for yourself, but your community, to really see, eyes wide open what this looks like around the country. And we can't wait to welcome you here on Monday. Everybody's going to be spread out all over the country because we're doing this virtually this year, but we'll be here. Garrett and I will be here. There'll be a small group of folks here, our core team in Las Vegas, and you always have a home here. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, Nathan, I want to ask you, because you told me before
you are crazy though, because it is we're crazy too. Like, I mean, that being like, I'm just going to drive. Nathan told me, he goes, I have no money. I'm going to do a GoFundMe. And I was like, okay, well, Voices Project will make first small donation. But like I was telling Nathan, I was like, when Garrett and I left Los Angeles,
we didn't have enough money to make it out of California.
We didn't have enough money to make it out of California at the time.
We got and that's where we got our next donation to move to the next day.
Was McFinn. John Holder said you guys are going to need some money to get home.
But I'm curious, Nathan. Now that you're in Utah right now, and you've done that, how do you feel at this moment, where you're at that point where you've made it across the country? Like, what's your feelings right now? Because I remember how I felt when we had to drive back.
Yeah, Garrett almost punched me in the face, if I remember.
I almost left me on text.
Well, okay, so I have a disease that wants me to isolate, right? Wants me to be alone with my thoughts. And I've had a lot of time to be alone with my thoughts. Still broke. Still have absolutely no idea what the heck I'm doing. But I'm telling you, I've gotten some great donations along the way. I've had both financially and food, lodging. In fact, I'm staying with somebody in the recovery movement tonight here in Utah. So it's been humbling. It's been incredibly powerful, and I was trying to be so darn careful about not making expectations before I left of what this would be, because I understand the idea that expectations lead to resentments, and I still, of course, I'm human. I had expectations, but I've seen growth in the way I think about all sorts of things. One of the very first goals I had from the very beginning, and I won't go into it too much detail right here, but one of the first goals I had, it became quite apparent that I was doing it for the wrong reasons. So I had I had a rethink. I talked to, I do a 12-step fellowship, and I had a rethink and talked to my sponsor and some other people in my network. And I was like, what the heck am I doing? I'm going to cause more harm by trying to fix something that I don't need to fix. So that was helpful. And then a lot of long drives with my thoughts. And I'll tell you, the country's incredibly beautiful.
It is.
The people I've met along the way, being in a pandemic, being in an epidemic inside of a pandemic.
Right.
It's like those dolls, those nesting dolls, right? It's driving around the country and explaining to people, because I talk what I'm doing, and they kind of look at me like some of them look at me like I'm crazy, but I'm getting a lot of good support. But Garrett, to answer your question, I'm ready to come home. I'm ready to get to some work. Our General Assembly does its reconvene. Our special session, I'm sorry, to iron out the budget actually starts on Tuesday. So the same day, we'll be joining everybody in Las Vegas. I'm missing an opportunity to be, well, I guess I can still do it online because it's all online now, but all the money committees and trying to make sure that, the money doesn't get, it's going to get pulled out from under us, but the same things that happened to you don't happen, as that $1 million you guys lost is tremendous. And that $1 million.
Yeah, we lost $1 million in behavioral health care money in the South. In Nevada, we lost about $500,000 in the North, and then a 39% decrease in the problem gambling budget, which is just insane. But it's happening all across the country. I mean, our behavioral health care money, recovery support money to treat addiction, mental health is always first on the chopping block. So, it's like the priorities, right? So, I think that's one of the things out of Mobilize this year is that, when last year's Mobilize was really around building constituency, right? It was like building network. It was building leaders. It was offering empowerment, leadership empowerment training. And this year is much more around tactics, right? Like, how do we take what we have and put it into use on the ground in terms of community organizing, and also, the agenda for a lot of the leaders and people like you and us. We all have a very, I think, aligned values and goals in 2020, 2021, because it's like, while, pre-COVID, we would have been fighting for more, right? We would have been, what we have is already insufficient. But now we're at a place where we have to protect what we have, right? We have to protect what we have from being raided. So we have to hold on to that right now while making the case for more. So our work, right, collectively, everyone who will be with us next week and those who won't be with us next week who are involved in this work, got a lot more complicated. We've also seen, and where it's been hard, is a lot of advocacy groups, right? So the Voices Project, Recovery Advocacy Project, Mobilize Recovery are the initiative of the two. We have, since our founding, been very centered on, lifting up, building leaders like yourself, Nathan, right? Like giving tactics, giving support, building community network, best practices around community organizing, electoral development, in terms of addiction and recovery as a voting issue, voter registration, things like that. And we've all seen, I think, any advocacy organization, even if they're a straight advocacy organization, we've had to focus a lot more on the direct service work, right? So McShin is a direct service organization, but we've seen advocacy orgs have to shift a little bit to be more focused and centered on the direct services as well, because people are getting turned away. We have people who need help, whether it be from substance use disorder, mental health, people who are on the verge of suicide. There was a study that came out just 2 days ago, the CDC, that over a quarter, 25% of young people in this country have contemplated suicide since the COVID began.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah, and amongst young people, 13% of them have started using substances to cope with the stress and the anxiety because of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. Those same people like us, people in our community, reach out to a hospital or reach out to a crisis unit, and for the most part, a lot of people are being told, you don't have COVID, we don't have capacity to see you right now or deal with you right now. So our work in the advocacy space has had to really shift, in a sense, to advocate harder, but also to serve the needs of those people who are being turned away, right? So it got more complicated. So you're in for 3. Our our days are packed next week. There's going to be
Johnny seems to be wondering why it's virtual. I'll show you this comment. He said,
Johnny, you should come.
Yeah, just come.
Get in your car.
Johnny,
Nathan.
Johnny, where are you? I'll pick you up.
Yeah, meet Nathan. And where are you? Utah?
I'm in Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. Meet Nathan in Salt Lake City. He'll give you a ride for the rest of the way.
Yeah.
I've already got a room booked too, so Yeah.
John, I think Nathan, while you're traveling the country and you're obviously seeing what Ryan and I saw on our trip, that no two communities are alike, which is like why we're trying to do what we're doing and allowing you to leave Las Vegas with tools and resources and trainings and knowledge, because we can't fight, for what you need in Virginia is completely different than not completely different, but it's going to be different for here or somebody coming out of Tennessee and Knoxville or Alaska or New York. So it's like, and our eyes opened, or at least mine did, by how I didn't know this was going to happen. I thought all the same issues when I left, 4 years ago. Everything that we were experiencing in Pasadena, California was the same thing that was happening in Texas and the same thing that was happening in Oklahoma and so on and so forth. And that is, obviously completely opposite from the truth. This whole thing, I think, was not like we had this idea from that trip, but it's kind of like think locally, act locally, and let the grassroots kind of carry the momentum up to the top. And I think that's what the whole point of Mobilize was.
Any structure of like a successful organizing movement, there's a generational model, that's been around before I was even born, right? So you can look at the civil rights movement, you can look at the LGBTQ movement, you can look at the labor movement, quite frankly. Some of our trainers next week were trained by a gentleman named Marshall Gans, who led the farm labor movement in California. There is a model that works, and it does start, like to just add to what Garrett was saying, from the grassroots. It starts in your backyard, right? A lot of people are looking to Washington, D.C. or some big city for solutions. And like a friend of mine and mentor and someone I deeply respect has once always told me, if you want to know how to ruin a community organizing campaign, you run it out of Washington, D.C. It just doesn't happen, right? There's a huge disconnect. You also have the ability to build power much easier locally, right? There's a way to do it. Like you have a better shot, Nathan and Alex and others, of like really building like substantial power and constituency and agency in your local community, where you can start to see a shift versus kind of like this abstract go national deal, right? Now, the national deal is important. Don't get me wrong. And there's people who do that very well, right? But where we've not focused enough on is really that one-to-one, organizing your block, organizing your backyard, organizing your neighborhood, people who are closest to you. And you see real change, and change bubbles not from the top down, it bubbles from the bottom to the top, right?
Yeah, and even if you look at, say, something like the decriminalization of cannabis, at one point you have so many different community and then statewide efforts. Eventually, nationally and federally, they'll be like, okay, they clearly want this enough so let's give them what they want. So I don't see why the recovery RCO fundings can't get kind of more traction like that. It makes more sense to have more boots on the ground, work in your local community, and then you have all this portfolio to look at and say, okay, federal government, this is clearly working. Can we get money now instead of the other way around?
Right. A lot of the decisions that we're like here in our state in Nevada, like a lot of these decisions, funding decisions, come down from Carson City. So we could spend all day advocating that Congress and SAMHSA and others, put more, funding towards recovery supports. We could see more discretionary funding, going towards recovery supports or recovery community organizations. But the hard line is that the federal government is going to appropriate that money to the state, right? And then the state is going to, in most cases, determine where that money goes, right? So if you don't have the ear of your state legislators or your governor or your decision makers in your local area and in your state capital, right? We've seen instances where money that's tagged for recovery supports goes to pay for, billboard campaigns, and awareness campaigns and stigma, erasing stigma campaigns. I mean, like total, well-intended uses, but like totally not what a recovery support is, right? I mean, so, and that's because we haven't been as visible, as we could be, where we can really have some power.
But I love this, because the conversations that I've been having across the country, and to Garrett, what you were saying, all the individuals I've met and all the different organizations have had very different constituencies, and the needs of the one constituency is not going to be the same as the other. However, there are commonalities. We're still attacking a mental health issue. We're still attacking a health crisis. The organization I met in with Seattle was meeting basic needs with people on the street, providing lunches and dinners, and then they have this free recovery cafe that's now not operational because of COVID. So they've, turned everything into bag lunches that they hand out at the door, and they're still meeting other needs. There's a lot of dealing with individuals experiencing homelessness. The people I met with in Elkton, Maryland were putting the backpacks on, and they were out on the streets. And I don't know much about harm reduction. I'm really grateful that I'm learning more about it through my own process here. But what they were doing, man, I just thought, these people are just going out there and just, we're talking not even grassroots. We're talking like dirt, ant level right there, because of really making those connections and continuing those connections and making connections with other. Like, I think it was I don't know if it was Episcopalian or a Catholic church, but there was a woman there, that they've been able to bond with, and they were able to use the resources locally to assist with and help with, which is what it's beautiful about community building to me. It's very individual, it's very local. And yes, we do have some of the bigger, broader things. Yes, we need more funding for recovery. We need to eliminate the possession, penalties, felonizing people because they have a healthcare issue. So there's a lot that can be done on the national and the broader level, but that state, local, individual level, man, it's such a beautiful thing. And some of the ideas I think can come back to work at McShin, and some, perhaps not, because they don't really affect our communities the same way. But it's just beautiful to see that people are doing and adapting. And I love, just being able to recognize that. In Virginia, you guys probably know, we had a blue wave last year. Our entire legislature was elected in November last year, and Democrats in the House, Democrats, everywhere in Virginia right now. So, not saying recovery's purple across the board. We tend to get more done with Democrats, but that doesn't mean always the case. We have a state senator who represents where McShin is. She's a Republican, and she does great work for us. Excuse me. So I'm not advocating blue or red really. However, historically, we've been able to get more through with the Democrats.
I'm not going to advocate blue or red either, but I will say one thing is that you can't be for recovery. You can't be pro recovery and pro ending the overdose crisis in this country and be for raiding Medicaid. They just don't work together.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And with the General Assembly that met in January in Virginia, we were able to move forward with a couple of things that we weren't able to move forward with it in the last few years. Which isn't to say we had a Republican-controlled General Assembly the last couple of years, and we had a Medicaid expansion. So we've had good things happen.
Medicaid expansion is great. I mean, look at what it's probably done in your state. Look at what it's done in Ohio. I mean, Medicaid, it can look in other states that have had Medicaid. I mean, and where they're taking it to the polls right now, and Medicaid expansion is passing by voter mandate. I mean, it's phenomenal. Without Medicaid, one of the things that I think is important that we advocate for is more access to Medicaid, right? Without Medicaid, I'd be dead.
Me too. Well, I wouldn't have health insurance. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you know, I'm looking at, like, I was in Oregon and I was reading about what is it called? It was IP 44, but now it's proposition there. It's 110, I think, something like that. But where they're going to use the dollars. You know, this is a simple and easy solution that you know, we're talking about decriminalization and legalization of marijuana all across the country. And in Virginia, decriminalization just passed. So we've got like nominal amounts of money, you know, tickets for marijuana. Yeah, just marijuana. And that money absolutely should have been earmarked for recovery and treatment or prevention or anything that has to do with, you know, something to help with the crisis. And we didn't, you know, I think we missed an opportunity there. But I do think there's an opportunity.
Nathan, let me ask you a question. How many people showed up? How many phone calls were made? How many letters went to the legislature? How many? Like, we don't have that type of lobby. We don't have that type of power. I see Dan, my good friend Dan Schneider, jump on about the People's Lobby.
The People's Lobby.
Spent a lot of time together and talking about this, and we're aligned on this, you know, in terms of building this type of power. And I know he's doing a lot of great work. And, you know, go check out Dan's Tunnel of Hope, and sign up to get involved with him, and check out us at recoveryvoices.com. But like, really, we're looking at the next level of kind of the new recovery advocacy movement. It's one thing for us to be out, right? Like, I have a lot of people who are telling me you're getting too disruptive, and you're, you know, we don't do things like this in recovery advocacy because, like, we just got our spot at the table, and, you know, don't go too hard on the legislators because they won't invite you back.
Don't jeopardize it. Yeah.
Don't jeopardize what we've already done and built. But look, I'm 5 years recovery, right? Coming up on 6 years in February. I think it's great that people are out and they're more open about it. But I say this often, like, I'm kind of sick and tired of just getting like a nice little pat on the head and a
certificate
proclamation in Recovery Month. I mean, you know, and that's to the extent of it in a lot of places.
Yeah, a good old attaboy doesn't get the job done.
Yeah,
I'm with you 100%, Ryan. I think of the people that I know who, in the mid '80s, when AIDS was a problem. Well, AIDS is still a problem, but when AIDS, you know, was first coming on the scene, and they were trying to get Ronald Reagan to even just say the word AIDS, you know, because right then it was that gay cancer. You know, I think of you know, you talked about other civil rights movements, and I really, at some point, and this is not maybe the court to do it, but, you know, we look at, you know, you can look at labor law and how the court cases have decided what's going to happen with labor. We can look at the civil rights movement with as it affects people of color. We talk about Brown versus education and those things. You know, we talk about Loving versus Virginia. We talk about Texas. What is it? Texas back in 1999, 2000. That was very recently. You know, and then we talk about the case, I'm forgetting the name of the case, but I'm thinking, you know, same-sex marriage law of the land. You know, so I see these giant pivotal moments in history that are very often defined by court cases, and I wonder
that was overturning Prop 8 in California. I mean, that's the thing about, you know, gay marriage. As a gay man, like, I followed it and continue to study it, but you know, marriage equality didn't just show up one day and happen. I mean, it also didn't start in the Supreme Court, right? It started.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Right. I mean, there was a.
And I got to tell you something, Garrett. Ryan, in 1999 and in 2000 and 2001, I was working for the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force in Washington, and at the time, the conventional wisdom, if you recall, what was it called? Civil unions became the thing in Vermont, in what's his name state. And at the time, we thought that was the best we were going to get. And nobody in a million years at that point, not anybody I worked with at least, expected that gay marriage would be something that would happen within the next 20 years. You know, we thought 50, 60 years maybe. You know, so that to me.
Have you watched the Case Against 8? Anybody who's interested in if we're just blabbing right now, but there's a great documentary on HBO called The Case Against 8. and anybody who's interested in what we're talking about should check it out. It's phenomenal.
Well, and I'll at least ask, because Nathan, we've talked about this before. Is it going to does it really have to be darkest before the dawn? Because in all of these examples that we're giving, civil rights movements, regardless of what the discrimination was, it always ended up being, all right, someone's got a subsection has to be pushed to its total limit and then say, I'm fed up with it. So are we just going to wait until that happens? You know what I'm saying?
Alex, I would say it's pretty dark right now.
That's what I was going to talk about. Like, how much deeper do we have to go as a community before somebody stops saying, don't push it too much, we're already here? Like, aren't we at that point now where it's like, I know Johnny just put it up, or get in good trouble. I mean, I think we're at that point, and at least in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The level of being unwelcome, and I'm going to talk about this next week though, but it almost feels as though we're not, and when I say we, I'm not talking about, me individually. I'm talking about this community. People who have been impacted have been unwelcome really in the healthcare system. They've been unwelcome when it comes to housing. They've been unwelcome when it comes to employment, right? Like we still have barriers that exist for, people who use drugs, right? And housing issues, and people who are in recovery and having housing issues. There's still employers who, can discriminate against hiring someone based on their past history with SUV.
Ryan, I'm 10 years out from an arrest, and I was just denied a rental property 6 months ago. Like, I've changed my life. I'm sorry, keep going, but it's like it continues.
Yeah, and we're not the level of services too, right? Medication, long-term support services, access to healthcare, access to housing, all the social determinants of health, right? Across the board, the disparities are just huge. In terms of marginalized communities, BIPOC communities, LGBTQ plus communities, almost non-existent, right? I mean, we have completely forgotten about a class of people in this country. And it is bothersome that in the middle of an election year, right, we're starting to see once again campaign websites, and this isn't political because it happens with everybody, with promises and plans about how they're going to end the addiction crisis. All sorts of promises. This happened 4 years ago. I think it would be a stretch to say that federally there was anywhere over a $7 billion investment towards the addiction and ending and curbing overdose deaths nationally. Maybe $7 billion nationally spread over 4 years. At the height of the AIDS crisis in 1992, right, when approximately 49,000 people died that year, we were seeing an investment upwards of $20 billion every single year.
Wow.
Every single year, like massive money in research, in treatment, in education, right? That was in 1992, right? We can't get $20 billion strung together in the course of 4 years.
Well, and now you also have a president in Bill Clinton who is like one of the faces of, AIDS funding right now. You go from a Reagan who is having trouble saying it to now, I mean, they keep the title president forever, but still I think that's a huge major win. And when is recovery going to have that person that steps up to the plate and says,
right, there was also, and the way, but then you look at like the Ryan White Act, right? I mean, with the way that the infrastructure around really effective, HIV prevention, treatment strategies, housing for people who were HIV positive, providing services to them was under the Ryan White Act. The federal government didn't call all the shots with the money, right? The federal government created kind of local control boards that were community-based in different communities around the country and let them really have a seat at the table in terms of the services that their community needs. There was a similar piece of legislation that was modeled after the Ryan White Act called the CARE Act. that's still waiting for a committee hearing. The House Energy and Commerce Committee. So I'm a little mad about that because it would have been $100 billion investment, $10 billion a year for 10 years. But it kind of stuck there. So anyway, none of us individually can change this, by the way. And like Dan and I were talking about that this morning, like no matter how big you are, no matter how many books I may write or know how many TV shows someone does or anything, like one person alone cannot and should not do this. Like it is going to take a broad coalition of a tremendous amount of leaders with tactics and tools and support to get this work done, right? We need to be, sharing resources. We need to be going out and finding, our people, right? And we need to be giving them what they need to get done, what they see as the barriers in their communities. And when we look at it from a local basis, it's a lot easier to kind of piece together than saying, looking at the entire map of the United States and how we're going to organize the whole country, And I think that is what we're like. People, for those folks who are coming to Mobilize next week, like I have to explain to folks, like coming to Mobilize isn't like I don't have all the solutions. Garrett doesn't have the solutions. Mobilize Recovery does not have all the solutions or the answers or the agenda of what you should be doing in your community. We can show you what other communities have done, right? But most importantly, we can give you tools. We can give you resources. We can give you a peer network to lean on. We can give you best practices. We can show you, not me individually or Garrett individually, but through the voices and the teachings of people who have built successful community organizing efforts, what you need to be doing and where you can start, right? And I think that that's something that I was yearning for and needing when I entered the advocacy activism space that was not available to me. And so when we built, as a collective Mobilize starting last year, it was around, and we don't call it a conference. It's more of an initiative. It's an institute of learning, right? It's like where you can get skills. We built it with the person in mind who is eager to do this work, but doesn't know where to start, right? Or who has been doing this work for a long time and feels stuck in the mud like I did, right? So what do you do? Like in recovery, what do we do when we don't know what to do, right? Well, we don't do much. We try not to do something that we don't know how to do. We go find people who have done it before us.
Who do, yeah.
You do know what they're doing, right? We don't try to pretend that we know what we're doing and, it's the blind leading the blind. No, we go find people who have done this and who know what they're doing. And that's what we've done with Mobilize. We've gone out and we've sought the advice in the council and brought other people from other movements who have helped to build other movements, and we bring them in with people in our space. So we're learning from each other. But in terms of tactics, some of the stuff people will hear next week and Mobilize this. I know when I heard it, it was the first time I had heard some of this. I thought, why haven't, it was like an aha moment. Why haven't we been doing this all along?
But you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, Nathan, I'm excited. I could go on all day, but we have more work to do to get prepared. We got a couple hundred people, and plus we got to get Vegas ready for you. So we're looking forward to
Ryan and Garrett. I would be remiss if I didn't ask one question.
Sure.
And because what I'm looking at right now, 4 squares of people, and it's 4 white men.
Right.
And I bring that up not to maybe speak to and give you an opportunity to speak to maybe some of the comments I've been reading on Mobilize Recovery's page, but also what it is that you guys are creating with this inclusivity track. I forget the thing, but I would love to ask you about that and why you're doing that and why that is so important.
Ryan, go for it.
Yeah. I actually really appreciate you bringing that question up. The inclusivity caucus. So I am a white gay male. Part of what we are seeing and have seen in the recovery space is people have not put enough attention on marginalized groups to build leadership within groups who have been left behind. We need to do a better job in the recovery movement of not just lifting up people for panels and experiential work, BIPOC community members to hear their stories, tokenism, I guess you could use the word. We need to give them equitable access to resources, to funding, to tactics, to learning, to build power in their community. And the best thing that I can do is to answer that I don't have all the answers, but I want to be the best ally that I can. And I want to lift up people and give them that space. I want to help them build that space. I want to be the best ally that I can. So for Mobilize, we have brought in a tremendous amount of learning around privilege, white privilege. We can, be honest and say the majority of people who will attend Mobilize probably will look like me and probably will look like you. We have done a good job, I think, in diversifying participation as much as we can, given it is an open process for people to come in. But people like me and people like you and a majority of the crowd don't really understand how to identify privilege or what that means. So we want to make sure that we're giving them that learning so that they can be of support to their community. I also believe that Mobilize, again, is not a place to come for all the answers. And the 4 white males who are on this call with you right today shouldn't be dictating an agenda for the BIPOC community. We should be creating a safe space where we're listening to the BIPOC community and their recommendations and what resources they need. And we should be supporting them every step of the way and fighting right alongside of them, right? We should be doing everything in our power to build more power for them. And in many instances, if not all instances, more power to them than to us. Like, that is how I feel. And I have, fielded many calls and comments around this in the last couple of weeks. And the best thing I can say is me, Garrett, the team at Mobilize Recovery are suiting up. We are showing up to be the best allies that we can, right? And we don't have all the answers, but we have to work together. We do have a shared value, though, right? We have shared values in terms of what we're seeing happening in our community, but we have to work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you
Mobilize.
for addressing that, Ryan.
Thank you.
Hey, and one other, and please, I'm going to need a lot of room in Las Vegas, so get it all ready for me. Since I've seen Dan Schneider on, I want to shout out to Dan. Man, he was an incredible host in what do you call it? Darn it, in St. Bernard's Parish, the parish. There it is, right there. Dan, did I say that right? He was an incredible host. I enjoyed speaking to him. It was very moving for me and meeting his family. And thank you, Dan. I appreciate you. Garrett, I look forward to meeting you in person. Ryan, I look forward to meeting you in person too. Likewise. Alex, man, I can't wait to see you again. And I just want to say thanks again for bringing this together. I'm sorry my connection has been pretty crappy, but I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come out and be here and talk about Mobilize Recovery. I'm really excited about this.
Thanks,
You're
man.
mobile. You're a man on the move.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
No, it's been beautiful, guys. Loved having you on. It's been an absolute delight. Definitely go to mobilizerecovery.org to all that would want some more information or register. I did it in the middle of this podcast. Probably not the smartest time to do it, but I was just so excited about it. I had to do it. So appreciate having you guys on, and hopefully until next time. Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
One thing we do here, we always educate our participants. I want you to leave here after your 30, 60, 90 days or however long you stay and leave. I want you to be educated about the disease of addiction, about substance use disorders, what you need to do to personally recover. But I want you to know why we don't have the support we should have. I want you to know where all the funding goes, what the thinking is of our culture, why we're the way we are. And just for the record, everybody put their right hand up. I hereby deputize each and every one of you as an ambassador to be a face and voice of recovery from here on out. You've just been deputized. You just became ambassadors of a recovery movement, an authentic recovery movement. What authentic means is by people in recovery themselves. This is our call to action.